Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're back to talking about strange cases. This case is particularly strange because I find most cases about quote-unquote self-kidnapping or whatever you want to call it, fake kidnappings, extremely strange just because as much as I try to understand, I almost never really can, especially in situations like this one, which we're going to get to in a second. The Vanishing Act, how Sherry Papini followed investigators' family with phony kidnap plot. 2020 takes a look back at the 6-year saga of the phony kidnapping case. It was the shocking abduction of a mother of 2 small children that rocked a family, a Northern California town, and the nation. After Sherry Papini turned up on the side of a highway 3 weeks after her mysterious disappearance, investigators worked tirelessly to find the people responsible. But in the end, it was Sherry herself who masterminded her own disappearance and inflicted numerous injuries on herself while staying with an ex-boyfriend who was unaware of her scheme. She told investigators that she was taken by 2 fictional Hispanic women and held against her will for weeks before being let go. Right off the bat, there's a lot going on here. Now, the reason why I was saying before that it was difficult for me to even try to understand or comprehend or relate in some way is mainly because of the children. Now, obviously, inflicting that kind of worry, fear, pain, so on and so forth on your loved ones in and of itself is not only horrible, questionable, and a series of other things, but I think it gets to a new level when it involves children, especially children who are extremely young and too young to understand. And to be entirely honest, even if this were an 18-year-old kid or something like that, I still don't think anyone would understand. Last week, she owned up to her lies, pleading guilty to 1 count of making false statements and 1 count of mail fraud. She was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, double the amount of time requested by federal prosecutors. I'm guilty of lying. I'm guilty of dishonor. I stand before you willing to accept, to repent, and to concede, she said during the September 19th hearing. What was done cannot be undone. From the start, the investigators suspected something was off. Papini, a then 34-year-old mother of 2, went missing on November 2nd, 2016, while out for a jog in her Redding neighborhood. A massive search was launched for her, with community and family members, including her husband, Keith Papini, pitching in to find the missing mom. At the time, Keith Papini pleaded with the public for help. It is excruciating. I don't like to think too much about it because I just assume I'm going to get a phone call any second or she's going to show up at my house. A reward was offered for information relating to the case and a GoFundMe account was set up by friends of Keith Papini to aid the family's search efforts, which raised nearly $50,000. On November 24th, 2016, Thanksgiving Day, Sherry Papini was found on a highway about 146 miles away from Redding, with injuries covering her body, including a Bible verse branded on her shoulder. The bruises were just intense, Keith Papini told ABC News shortly after his wife was found. She's always had very long blonde hair, and they chopped it off. Recorded police interviews with Sherry Papini in the hours after her return showed she was reluctant to speak with investigators, claiming that her abductors told her she was going to be trafficked to someone in law enforcement. 2 women. There was an older one and a younger one, Sherry Papini told the police. They were Hispanic, they spoke Spanish a lot. Given her reticence to speak, officers had her husband sit in with her during one interview and ask the questions about what happened. Detectives later returned for a second interview, but Sherry Papini remained reluctant to open up to them. I don't know you guys. I don't know if you're in my corner. I know my husband. I know my husband's in my corner, she said during interview with investigators. So one thing that I obviously wanted to mention in regards to what we read before along with this, she lied, right, about being kidnapped, and that's been established. One thing that I think should get a little bit more emphasis, or that at least I'm going to emphasize here, is I want to know where the 2 Hispanic women who kidnapped her in the fictitious story, where did that come from? Why was it Hispanic women specifically? Because the way I see it, and this is just my opinion, so it's by no means fact, why did it have to be Hispanic women? I'm just wondering, because that also seems like a very specific demographic that you're picking, and for what reason? I really don't understand what there is to gain from any of this, but not only to do this to your significant other, but also to your children and effectively to everyone who's around you, close to you, to be looking for you. It kind of makes you wonder, okay, so what was the straw that broke the camel's back here, basically? Now, this goes back to the whole they were 2 Latino women aspect that she was saying. Alan Ernesto Phillips, the co-founder of the Northern Hispanic Latino Coalition, told ABC News that the hunt for suspects rattled the Redding Latino community. Latino women were fearful that they might look like one of the people in the sketch, he said. Former Shasta County Sheriff's Deputy Captain Pat Cropholler told ABC ABC News that investigators noticed several red flags in the story Sherry Papini told about her abduction and abuse. For instance, she had different explanations as to why she was branded by her abductors. After her return, investigators collected Papini's clothing so that it could be tested for any biological material. They were eventually able to determine that DNA belonging to a male was present on her clothing, but when DNA was searched in the criminal database, no positive hits were returned. While searching her phone records, investigators were also able to determine that in the days prior to her abduction, Sherry Papini was in touch with several men. Police also began to question Papini's friends and an ex-husband who spoke about her tendency to lie and run away. That is how she used to deal with things as a child. When things got hard, she would just run away. Asia Coleman, one of her friends, told the Shasta County Sheriff's Department during an interview. There were some infidelity issues in her background that even Keith had told us about, Prop Holler told ABC News. Investigators made little progress in the case until 2020. With the help of genetic genealogy, that DNA was finally matched to James Reyes, an ex-boyfriend of Sherry Papini. When the police questioned him, Reyes initially said that he had not spoken to Sherry Papini in years, but he eventually revealed that she'd asked him for help. Detectives told NBC that Sherry Papini lied to Reyes, telling him she was being abused by her husband, Keith. She was trying to get away from her husband, Reyes told investigators, unaware that Sherry's allegations against Keith were unfounded. Reyes added that he didn't know anything about the two Hispanic women who Sherry Papini said held her at gunpoint. He revealed that Papini suggested he rent a car and pick her up, then they traveled 9 hours to Costa Mesa, where she stayed at his apartment with him for weeks. Reyes also revealed that the bruises, cuts, and burns on her body were largely self-inflicted, and that she also asked him to hurt her. Reyes recounted to investigators how Sherry Papini asked him to brand her. "I'm like, oh, this is probably going to hurt. I mean, I've never done this," Reyes told investigators. Reyes said things changed on Thanksgiving when Sherry Papini told Reyes that she missed her children. In August 2020, the police questioned Sherry Papini again with her husband by her side and told her they matched the DNA to Reyes. They also told her that Reyes had shared everything he knew. Sherry Papini at first deflected questions about Reyes' story, maintaining that she did flirt with other men and stuck to her story that it was two women who abducted her. "I don't understand. There's no way this is James. He loves me," she told investigators. So she ended up being arrested and charged with making false statements and mail fraud, and she actually cost the taxpayers and wasted resources, including money that she collected from the California Victims Compensation Board and Social Security disability income. So while this was disgusting all along, this additional aspect of taking advantage of a system for things that A, you don't need, B, that you put upon yourself in the sense of you decided to run away, you decided to, I guess, switch up your life all of a sudden. So if you don't have a job anymore, if you don't have a means to have money, if you're not there for your kids, I don't know in what world you'd think that you deserve help from the state when you're pulling a con, basically. And in fact, even the people around her were not happy. There were two local residents, Terry and Marilyn Smith, whose daughter Tara has been missing since 1998. Well, Marilyn said, "It just kind of makes a mockery out of anyone who's really lost a person." Then there was a point made about the Latino community, kind of what I said earlier, that the community was being vilified, which is true because you're basically saying, oh, there were these two Latino women who I can't describe in any fashion. It was them. They held me at gunpoint. It's pretty normal that anyone who fits the description of Latina, I suppose, would be worried, because if you're not giving any details, basically could be anyone. So if someone's at the wrong place at the wrong time, if they happen to do one thing that potentially lines up with whatever she made up, automatically they can become like, that's so gross, irresponsible, and personally, I think based in racism. Well, I came across some additional information about Papini. Now, everything here is to be taken with a grain of salt because a lot of this is anecdotal. Now, just because it's anecdotal doesn't mean it's not true. Now, a man who claims he once dated Papini says he's not a bit surprised she's in hot water. He also hopes to clear his name following her arrest. "She's a compulsive liar," Davari told Inside Edition. "She would not talk to you for 3 or 4 days, and then all of a sudden there'd be some fantastical story about what happened." Davari says he dated Papini when she was a 20-year-old youth counselor and he was just 15 years old. Now let me stop right the fuck there. If she quote-unquote dated him, which already I don't even know what the term is, groomed him, took advantage of him, was predatory. If that happened, in fact, there's a lot more to this situation in my opinion. In retrospect, sure, tons of red flags that she was a counselor that was going out with a 15-year-old kid, Davari said. Now 35, the college professor says Papini's lies were never ending. For example, he says she kept insisting she was a skilled surfer. "I surfed all the time when I was 15, 16 years old," he said. "It's something that I really enjoyed doing, and she told me that she surfed as well. There was always an excuse as to why she couldn't go surf, and she had to have her surfboard that was at her house but didn't have any pictures." Davari says there was a mystery medical condition. "She was faking a heart condition at one point, and eventually, not only me, but a bunch of people figured out that that was not true," Davari says. Not a fact, but just my opinion again. When people lie about really small things, I get very suspicious. Now, granted, obviously this is not a black and white rule. Like, everyone has lied at some point. Everyone has lied even to impress someone, especially if it's someone you like. Like, there's so many little situations I can come up with where lying is not that big of a deal and it's not inherently harmful. This is not that. In this particular situation, when you see people compulsively and continuously lie about effectively kind of unimportant shit, like if she said she didn't know how to surf, nothing of major consequence would have happened. In this particular case, I find it predatory because you're using this thing that's supposedly in common in order to bond with the victim, really. Concerning and disgusting, and it's also like, you're probably gonna say whatever you can in order to reel people in. Whether it's Davari or whether it's even the other people, other camp counselors that were there with this supposed medical condition. What are you trying to do? It's still predatory because what are you trying to get out of having that medical condition? Are you trying to get a different treatment from people? Like, what is the end goal there? So in terms of her husband and the children, Keith Papini filed for divorce shortly after her arrest and sought custody of the couple's 2 children. Both I and especially our children were traumatized by her disappearance, and I spent much time and money trying to find my wife. The trauma inflicted on our children at the unexpected loss of their mother was heartbreaking, he wrote in the court papers obtained by the Associated Press. Sherry was sentenced in September to 18 months behind bars, a sentence longer than both prosecutors and her defense team had recommended. I think the thing about cases like this, I don't understand them at all, which I think makes them interesting because, as I said before, if you can't relate, you can't really find an explanation, a solution, an answer, so you're just kind of stuck there like, what happened here? Especially as a mother with relatively young children, it feels doubly gross in my opinion, just because you're not only running away from a significant other, which in and of itself is bad enough to make someone worry about you like that consistently, traumatize them like that just because you felt like leaving. I am happy that they gave her a longer sentence, and honestly, I really do think, and I'm not saying this as a slight at all, but really just as a matter of fact, I do think that there should be some kind of psychological evaluation, because if this is something that's been happening apparently since her childhood where she'd run away, if there were issues, there might be something deeper there might be something going on, but generally speaking, if you're willing to go to these extents, I have to wonder, is there something that triggered her to want to run away? And, you know, to find a way to resolve that, because it isn't a way to live. It's not only directly unhealthy for her, but also for her children, for the people around her. If there's someone who's always disappearing, if they're consistently disappearing and they disappear another time, you might stop worrying if it's happened already 20 times, but what if this 20th time something actually happened? What if this time they need help from the police for real? You know what I mean? So it is dangerous because it's like the boy who cried wolf, right? Anyways, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.